Hi, my name is Kome Olori, founder of She Dares to Succeed. In this video, I'm going to be sharing my story of why I quit my job in corporate banking to become a full-time entrepreneur. So if that's a story that interests you, you definitely want to keep watching. You also want to grab yourself a drink, maybe a cup of tea, a glass of wine, some juice, whatever floats your boat, and let's get into it. Before I get into the gist, a little background information is I have a bachelor's degree in accounting and taxation from Covenant University, holla to my Eagles, and a master's in international management from the University of Essex in the UK. So from before I left university, I already knew that I was going to go into finance and I was going to work in banking most likely because that was kind of the first place I could think of where my skills would be needed. And so I was already set on that path even before I graduated from my bachelor's degree. The only thing was that while I was studying accounting, I kind of already knew that there was a disconnect because first of all, I had only chosen to study accounting because I had to study a professional course. If you're African or from an African background, you know what I mean. Is either you're studying to be a doctor, to be a lawyer, an accountant, or an engineer. It was like there were no other disciplines out there. Now, before I went into university, I had already voiced out my interest in theater art or mass communication, which would have put me in front of the camera again. But obviously, knowing my parents were trying to prepare me for a world where I would not be lacking employment, they suggested that I study accounting because my subjects just lined up to study accounting. So I found myself in university studying accounting, and then I graduated with a 2-1. I went to do a master's, and then I decided that okay, because I'd always wanted to work in banking, that I would find a banking job. And I was lucky and blessed enough that I found a banking job in London. At the time I was living in Sheffield, and so I had to move from Sheffield to London to take up this exciting new role in an international bank in London. And I can tell you that for the first few months into the job, I was super excited. It was like I was living the dream, you know, this girl who just, I was so young, and this girl who just moved from West Africa to study for her master's, and then within a year I was working in this bank. I was so excited, and I remember my friends telling me how lucky, how blessed I was. And I think for a long time I knew that I had gotten an opportunity that not many people would have gotten. So now the drama started a few months into the job, where I just realized that I had the skills for the job. I mean, I had studied accounting, I understood numbers, and as fate would have it, I was in the finance department in the bank. So I knew that I had the right skills, and it was interesting just dressing up and going to work and, you know, just being a banker for a few months. And then I think reality started to kick in when I realized as much as I could do the job, I wasn't excited about the job. I wasn't really enjoying the job. And then I wasn't really enjoying the politics that I could see unraveling before my eyes. So don't forget, I was really young. This was my first big job in the city, and interestingly, I was the only non-Caucasian female working in core banking. So it was daunting. It was strange, you know, and it was a bit weird because there was also a bit of culture shock going on, that, you know, the British culture was just so different from the Nigerian culture that I was used to, and even the university culture where everybody was warmer and friendlier, faculty and students were, you know, friends. It was so different. I want to say that I did make a lot of mistakes, you know. I was learning. I was in culture shock as well. I was learning, but that didn't take away from the fact that this job, I just knew that this job wasn't for me. I thought that when I eventually started working, I would be getting excited about where I was working. I'll be getting excited about my job, and I'll be excited about the challenges that will come with the job. But it wasn't happening. So about 6 months into the role, I asked to be transferred to a different department because at that point it hadn't yet clicked that it was the corporate world, it was the finance world that was the problem. I thought it was the role. So I asked to be moved to a different team, because I wanted to experience something else. And then my manager obliged me. They moved me to a different team. This time I was in risk, and it took like a couple of weeks for me to realize, okay, something is definitely wrong here, right? I didn't get the excitement that I was looking for. I didn't get the interest I was looking for, and it just started to feel very, very disconnected. So I started to know that something was wrong, but at that time I hadn't even connected the dots fully. So I just thought, with time I would settle into the job and I would love my job, because what's the point of working if you don't love your job? Anyway, fast forward a couple of years into this job, it hadn't gotten better. Every time I complained to the people around me, they just reminded me of how blessed I was to even have this job in the first place. And then on top of that, this job also had sponsored my visa. So I was on the work permit visa and I was in the UK because of that. And so it was just like all the things I wanted were happening. The only challenge was that I wasn't necessarily feeling blessed at the time. And so by my third year in the job, I started feeling a bit restless. I wanted so much more from what I was getting at work. And I started to think about what was the problem. Anyway, I moved again to a different department. This time it was a lot better. I think this new department was a bit more in line with what I would like to do normally. So I was now in trade finance department, and that had to do with letters of credit. A lot of, I won't bore you with the technical terms, but just know that it was trade finance. It was letters of credit and guarantees and stuff like that. And I felt like this department was the best out of the ones I had tried. It was a bit more like me because it had a lot of legalese and I liked that. So I started to work in that department, but something else got me frustrated, and that was the office politics. I just didn't like the office politics. It was dirty. Sometimes it was like so much sneakiness and backstabbing and betrayal and just a lot of things happening that I just didn't think was part of the job. And unfortunately, I didn't know how to play the politics. So I feel like I got probably the worst end of the stick because I didn't understand the politics for a long time and I didn't even know how to play it. And do you know what? Now in hindsight, I understand that I'm actually glad I never learned how to play office politics, because I just feel that it just changes who you are. Anyway, so office politics was going on. I was getting very irritated with everything that was going on. You would see a few people in alignment with each other, not necessarily because they liked each other, but just because of what they could get from one another. It was just weird. And I like to think that I'm quite straightforward in my dealings, and so it was very, very unusual for me. I struggled, really, like I so struggled. And from struggling, I found out that I started to feel rather down about the job, because don't forget, as much as this particular department was a lot better than being in the previous departments, it still wasn't exciting. It was okay. So I was managing the job, and then added with the politics on it, it just wasn't fun. Okay, so I started to complain again, and once again, people around me just didn't understand why I was feeling somehow about the role. And now what ordinarily people would have done would probably leave the job and go somewhere else, but I didn't have that option, because don't forget, my visa was sponsored by this organization, so I couldn't just up and leave. I couldn't look for a job, and I needed to be there for another 5 years before I could go. So it just went downhill from there. It just went downhill from there. I was so unhappy. And I remember, now that I think back, I remember that so many days I would wake up, it was like I was on an automaton. I would wake up, go to work, function, but I couldn't even remember most of the things that happened during the day because my mind was somewhere else. Or on the really bad days, I would find myself in the office bathroom just crying my eyes out because I was so unhappy. I was super unhappy. it was not something that I could shake after a while, because I had to go to this office every single day. I had to see the same people every single day. It just got so bad that I'm not a doctor, you know, but my mental health really, really suffered. It took a lot for me to shake off feeling down all the time, and just knowing that I had to go back and do it all again the next day. I remember that at about the third year into this job, I started to get really ill. Like, for no reason. I could never pinpoint what the problem was. I could never get any diagnosis from the doctor of why I was getting ill. Like, I just ached all over. My head ached, my body ached, my feet hot, the back of my legs hot. Everything was hurting for no reason, for no apparent reason. I was constantly tired, and like I said, I was constantly forgetting things. Like, I'm sure the people around me, like my colleagues, would think that I had a memory problem. I don't even know why, but I just realized that I was constantly forgetting things. Like, you would ask me stuff that happened a few minutes ago and I couldn't remember. You would ask me where I kept, you know, like stuff, and I just couldn't recall. And now that I look back, I wonder why I stayed that long, because from all indications I could see, you know, it was just obvious that I was suffering. I was dying inside slowly. I really, really, really didn't like the job. I didn't like the environment. It was getting to me. And I had to stay for a long time, because I just felt like I had come too far to stop. I had come too far to just quit, and I wanted to wait it out. Now, it turns out that while I was in that job, I started to think about what really I wanted to do. And I remember a conversation that I had with my husband. One day I came home, I was in tears, I was so sad, I was so unhappy. And I remember telling my husband that all the things that were wrong with this job, why I didn't feel fulfilled, why I was unhappy, why I was stressed, why I was hurting. And I remember him just sitting down there, because obviously it wasn't gist to him anymore. Like, he had heard it 1,000 times. Yes, we had agreed that it was better to tough it out and wait, but he just looked at me that day. I could see that the guy had had like enough. He had had it up to here with all the complaining, with all the talking. And unfortunately for him, he happened to be the only person who really, really got what I was feeling, because every other person, like my friends, just thought I was ungrateful. Like, a lot of people thought I was just ungrateful, or just, you know, just my own was just too much. Do you get? Like, my own was just too much. Anyway, so my husband was really like my first bouncing ball to tell him all the things that were wrong. Obviously, I spent most of the time with him when I was not at work. And that day, he just sat there and looked at me and he said, Kome, I've heard all the reasons why you don't like this job, right? But you've never told me what you want to do. Like, what do you want to do? And I just sat there looking at him. Like, I couldn't respond, because to be honest, I didn't have an answer. And he said, Kome, figure out what you want to do, then do it. That day, I cried like I've never cried before, because for the first time, it was like I finally got the message. It wasn't really just complaining about the job. It wasn't just about not fitting in. It wasn't just about feeling unfulfilled. I realized that it was actually an identity crisis going on here. As painful and as sensitive and as vulnerable as it feels to accept that, you know, I just realized I was actually going through an identity crisis. I had found myself in a work environment that didn't suit me. Yes, I had the skills because I was educated, and now I had the experience, but that wasn't where I needed to be. I didn't feel like I was making impact, like I was doing something that mattered, and so that bothered me. And then from bothering me, then the other extra things that were going on at work just piled onto that, and then made it this huge deal. So that day I cried so hard, because I finally got clarity. And then I started asking myself, Kome, what do you want to do? And so during that period, I went through a lot of trial and error. I took makeup classes. I went to drama school. I did makeup for movies. I did scary makeup. I tried a lot of things. I tried writing. I started to experiment with different things because I wanted to find me, because I felt like along the way I had lost me. And so I started to find myself and started to experiment and see what it was that actually excited me, what it was that made me happy, rather than just going into a work environment because it made sense, because I had the education or because it paid well. And to be honest, banking did pay well. But now that I look back, I realized that the money didn't make me happy for one day. Like it was not, and it was never enough for the pain that I was going through. Anyway, to cut the long story short, I eventually started to experiment, like I said, and then I started to realize the things that I liked. I started keeping a journal of everything that excited me, everything that I was thinking, all my plans. And then I started a side business, and I concentrated on building my side business slowly, because I knew that eventually I was going to need to make that jump, because I had made up my mind, like this was it. Like the moment I could leave, I was going to leave. Anyway, as God will have it, and as everything happened, I eventually got my permanent residence in the UK. I was now free. Just about that time, I got another job offer with another bank. I didn't take it. I chose to stay in this organization, even though it sounded crazy to everybody who knew me and how much I had complained about this place. But I chose to stay for 1 more year, and the reason I stayed was because I wanted to be sure that when I was leaving, I would be leaving into something better. Like my plans would have crystallized. I would have kind of gotten my bearings and known for sure where I was going to. So I didn't just want to go into a new job and, start learning the company and the politics and everything again, and, have to be present there, because I was comfortable in this job. I knew what I was doing. I was heading a team. I was fine, right? So in this job, I buckled down on my side hustle, and I started to really put the work in. Yo, guys, it was interesting that I would finish work, I would come home, and instead of going to sleep, I would spend the next 2 to 3 hours in front of the computer just working at this business, because I knew that it was for me, it felt like a do or die affair. It was either get it or die trying. And so this story is getting so long, so I might have to cut it off and then share in a later video the actual steps that I took before quitting my job that allowed me to quit my job. Eventually, I stayed at this company for 7 years in all. I can say that there were some good years in there. There were some really horrible years. But to God be the glory, I got what I needed to get to be able to move on. And I also started the business, which put me on a better standing and gave me confidence. But just before I eventually, called it quits, I realized that my confidence had taken a massive beating. Just being in this organization, my confidence was in tatters. Like I knew that if I just quit and then went off to start my own business, I would always question the fact that I would always question myself, and I would always feel like I was not good enough. That's why I couldn't cut it, right? So I decided that, okay, before I took that leap, I just left. It would be better to find another job, and try to get all the benefits that I wanted to get in my previous job, try to get it in this new job, and then from that job, I would quit. So that was what I did. I found another job, which was amazing. Like this was an amazing company. My bosses were amazing. In fact, I felt loved, I felt valued, I felt appreciated. It was just a totally different experience. I felt more confident. I knew that I was bringing value to the team. It was a more senior role. It paid a lot better. Like it really paid so much that I was asking myself, like, what changed? What happened? This is the same me that these people thought were not good enough, right? Anyway, in this job, I made some really solid friends. My bosses really took care of me, and I was so grateful that I had decided to go into another job before eventually just leaving. So I eventually stayed at this place for another 6 months, not because I needed the job per se, because I'd already made up my mind that I was leaving, and but it was more for my own self-confidence. So I got to be mid-management. I got to, you know, to make some key decisions, to be part of some decisions that were happening, part of some transformation, and to just really enjoy working for once. This was the first time that I had actually enjoyed working. Like, I didn't feel any stress, I didn't feel rejection, I didn't feel backstabbing. You know, I knew that there was still work politics, but this time it was different. You know, it wasn't the kind of toxic politics that I had come from. This was a more subtle place. So anyway, I really enjoyed that job. And so about a week into the job, anyway, I knew I was about a week into the job, I found out I was pregnant. So I started working towards my maternity leave, because I knew that there was no point coming back from maternity leave. So I started working towards it. It was a scary time. I have to say that it was a scary time, because finally, this is something I had wanted for so many years. I was eventually getting to do it. There was a bit of trepidation in there, like, what if I was making a mistake? I know that a lot of people advised me and said, just stay on, you know, continue. Now that you found a better place that you actually enjoy, just stay on. But my mind was made up. So eventually, when I left to have my baby, I knew I was never going back. And I was so happy. I mean, the day I walked out of my office to go and start my maternity leave, I was so grateful. Oh, wow, guys, I was so grateful. It was like a cloud lifted over my head. I felt blessed. I felt happy. I was so excited, and I have never looked back after that. Like, I knew that I wasn't going back. Eventually, fast forward a year later, after having my baby and everything, I mean, the company started reaching out to me and saying, would you like to come back? And I said, you know what, I'll think about it, because don't forget, I still had a lot of people, my family, my husband, asking me, are you sure? Do you want to go back? Do you want to reconsider this your decision? Do you want to do your main job and have this business on the side? But my mind was made up, and I said, okay, don't worry, I'm going to take time to pray about it. Guys, while I was praying about it, this company came back to me and said they were shutting down anyway, because that was when things started getting tough, and that was like towards the beginning of the year, and they just came back and said they were closing down. They were, you know, the company was going belly up, and I just felt like that was perfect timing. So I'm not happy that the bank didn't make it, but I was so happy that it didn't make my decision harder, because don't forget, I loved this place, but I was so happy that it was perfect timing. Like, God knew that I didn't need extra pressure, and it just solved everything for me. And that's my story. I have now been a full-time entrepreneur for the past 1 year, and I can tell you that there have been some tough times and some better times, but I would never trade it for anything in the world. It's been amazing just having my own time, having my own business, controlling my own resources, and taking decisions for myself, not having to deal with any toxic bosses or toxic environment, and just really doing something that really makes me happy, helping people start their own businesses or do the things that they've been dreaming about. Has just been the most exciting journey ever, and I'm so happy that I took the decision. Now, if you've watched this video to this point, I'm not asking you to go and quit your job, but if you've been feeling unhappy, stressed out, tense, depressed, anxious about your job, like you just know that you are doing something that you don't want to be doing, you don't feel fulfilled in that job, you feel unhappy all the time, you're constantly crying, I want to give you this word of encouragement that there is something better for you. You know, don't stay in a job just because of money. Don't stay in a job because everybody around you expects you to stay in the job. Don't stay in a job because it looks good on your CV. You know, you need to be doing something that makes you happy. I'm going to sign out from this video and say thank you so much for watching to this point. Thank you for watching to this point. Leave a comment down below. Tell me what you took away from the story. I would love to hear your comments, and you can watch more videos down here, especially if you're looking to start a business. I'll see you in my next video.